Peace and love. Welcome everybody back to the African Diaspora News channel with me, Richard Sudan. Thank you for tuning in. Before we get going, please like and subscribe and support the platform, and please spread the word. Now, there's a few things we need to talk about today which I think are massively important happening in the United Kingdom and also the United States, and I think these things are definitely linked. And I think what's happening is we are seeing a deliberate, concise attempt by white supremacy to preserve both itself and also its image. So starting off first here in the United Kingdom, as some of you may know, there has been a bill which is making its way through Parliament currently as we speak, on its way to becoming law. Now, this is known as the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill. Now, the government, of course, predictably on the one hand, are saying they need more power to clamp down on what they say is unlawful disruption. But the reality, actually, if you talk to most people here in the United Kingdom, is that the police and the authorities simply want more power to clamp down on legitimate protest. Now, the reason they want to do this is because over the last year or so, particularly last summer, there were massive Black Lives Matter protests which took place across the United Kingdom. Now, on the one hand, what we did see at some of these protests, for example, in Bristol, was the statue of Edward Colston, a well-known slave trader, was literally ripped down and thrown into the river. And we also saw the potentiality of people looking at other statues up and down the country, also maybe thinking about targeting and pulling down relics of the slave trade here in the United Kingdom. But it's not just about the statues. What we're also learning and what we're understanding is that the authorities are hugely concerned about the message of these protests and the effect of that message. Now, just to contextualize it a bit, the protests here in the United Kingdom really happened after the death of George Floyd in the US, and of course the protests which began there. And what happened here was people really began to question in a new and different way the foundations of the United Kingdom, its relationship to white supremacy, and they started to look at the police and they started to look at the royal family much more closely. Now, of course, here in the United Kingdom, the royal family here sit on top of an institution which was financed to the tune of millions and billions by the plunder and colonization of Africa and Asia and the global south. Now, off the back of these protests, we also have people questioning not just the institution of the royal family, but the royal family themselves. Of course, there was the big scandal recently over the comments made about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's baby and the baby's skin colour. And what we've really seen is this move by the authorities and the police to stop any future protests, not just because of the toppling of statues, but also because it's really starting for a new generation. It's making them question racism and white supremacy in a different way. Now, something that also happened here in the United Kingdom over recent days, some of you may have seen, there was a government-backed report which was supposedly independent and was called research, and I say that loosely. And what this report concluded was that the United Kingdom is not, I say again, not institutionally racist. Now, for anyone who's not been living on the moon, and for anyone that studies this seriously, for anyone that experiences racism in the United Kingdom, this report is ludicrous and it's been rubbished. And really what people are really saying is that this report is a very deliberate attempt to whitewash the reality and lived experience of racism in the United Kingdom, which is rife and arguably as bad as it's ever been. I actually tweeted the other day that I believe this report was quite obviously not written for those that have experienced racism, but is written for the kind of people that, believe Britain ended slavery. So really this report was a kind of grotesque expression of British nationalism, and I think also this report was really an attempt to present Britain's image around the world in a very different light to the reality here. This report is just not only false, it's hugely insulting, black people in the United Kingdom are, for example, 9 or 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched and harassed by the police. The issue of deaths in custody, again regarding the police, is a serious issue which has been an issue for decades, if not longer. And again, black communities are disproportionately affected by this issue, dying in very suspicious circumstances in police custody. And these families never get justice. One other example I could give you of very real institutional racism in this country is, of course, the Windrush scandal, which basically saw through Home Office and government policy, and we're continuing to see black people living in Britain who have the right to be in this country being deported by the government, being put on charter planes and deported to countries that, you know, people haven't even seen since they were children. Some cases we think people haven't even ever been in those countries, and yet we are seeing black Britons being deported under the most malign racist government policy in living memory. It's called here the hostile environment, and it was actually really that hostile environment was continued by former Prime Minister Theresa May. It wasn't begun by her, but it was very much continued by her government, and is definitely continued by this government here in the United Kingdom. We've also seen, and again this is fact, if you look at the statistics from the police and from the Home Office themselves, you can see a massive hike in racist incidents in the street. Black people, Muslim people, non-white people being attacked in the street left, right and centre, and those are just the incidents that we actually see recorded, and we imagine the actual figure to be much higher in reality. And I could go on and on. You see this kind of institutional racism in employment, in education, in housing, in healthcare. The list goes on and on and on. And so this report is really not worth the paper it's written on. And actually what we saw following the report was that people who are quoted in the report, and the report said it consulted them, some of these people actually came out and said, no, we were not consulted in this report, and we had nothing to do with it. And you also had Boris Johnson's most senior black advisor actually resign off the back of this report. So you've got the police in the United Kingdom desperate to get more power to clamp down on the message of the Black Lives Matter movement, and moreover the questions that are being asked about white supremacy in the United Kingdom, both institutionally and also of course with the royal family here in this country. Now, in my view, all of what's happening here in the United Kingdom is not separate to what's happening in the United States. Now, the one thing which has been incredible for a lot of us to see over the last few weeks is the US media making black people the face of racism in the United States. This is an unbelievable state of affairs. Black people have been subjected to and the victims of racism in the United States for hundreds of years. And now to see them being made the face of anti-Asian racism in the United States is quite incredible. Incredible because you saw a few weeks ago Robert Aaron Long, a suspected white supremacist, literally kill a number of Asian American women, and I believe he made statements which showed that he was a white supremacist before these killings were carried out. And now you've got the media in America very deliberately trying to shift now the emphasis of racism away from white supremacy in the United States, which is of course at the foundation of the country, and shift it onto black people who are the victims of white supremacy in the United States. And we've seen this happen literally over the course of a couple of weeks. And so what you're seeing in the United Kingdom and in the United States is a desperate attempt by white supremacy to preserve not just itself, but of course its image. And you're going to see more and more of this. What we saw in the United States, again linked back to the protests following George Floyd, is that there was a kind of renewed focus on institutional racism in the United States. Of course, we know that black people are killed left, right and centre by the police in the United States. The police almost never face investigation, are almost never charged, and certainly are almost never jailed. And so we've seen this attempt to shift the focus away from white supremacy onto people that are the victims of white supremacy. But I do think more and more people are waking up to this reality too. One example that we saw recently, also in the United States, is that there was an alleged attack by a man on the US Capitol, which led to the death of a policeman. Now, what we saw immediately in the aftermath of this was the media trying desperately to make links between this man and the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan. Now, the links are at best tenuous. Most people are saying there are no real links. And I think one thing we can really take away from this is this. You have this desperate attempt to make black people the new face of racism in the United States. Why is this? This is because, in my view, on January the 6th, we saw very real white supremacists with a very clear ideology that they've been very loud about convene on the Capitol committing acts of terrorism, and this was even acknowledged by the FBI director Christopher Wray himself. And so you have all these conversations about white supremacy, people looking at white supremacy in America, people around the world looking at the state of white supremacy in America, and they're saying, what is going on? And so there's this attempt to shift the focus away from white supremacy, to divert attention away from it, and we need to keep our eye on the ball, and we need to be very aware and cognizant of what is happening, because this is a very dangerous state of affairs. We know that when white supremacy seeks to preserve itself, it's going to come out all guns blazing. And so my prediction is you're going to see more and more of these examples. And just on that point, you know, in the United States, we saw the same videos being circulated again and again of black people allegedly attacking Asian people. Now, some of these videos actually are highly questionable in terms of their legitimacy. But the fact is that even if you were to say these videos are genuine, and there's a massive question mark over these videos, these are individual examples of people attacking Asians. There's no ideology attached to this. Now, the people that convened on the Capitol on January the 6th actually had an open ideology. They were very clear about their intentions. And so just at the point where everyone's really starting to focus on this threat, you're seeing that the focus on this threat really threatens to challenge the status quo in the United States. And of course, at the moment, we've also got the trial of Derek Chauvin, which many people are actually trying to make the trial of George Floyd, who's not on trial. Derek Chauvin is on trial. And a lot of people are saying, look, is the groundwork here being laid for Derek Chauvin to walk? Because of course, if people are silly enough and stupid enough to believe that black people are the face of racism in the United States, if there are more attacks on black people in the US, if someone like Derek Chauvin walks, if people have really believed this lethal cocktail of lies, then I suppose white supremacy will be more likely to get away with it yet again. But make no mistake about it, there is a definite link between these examples of white supremacy, definitely desperately trying to preserve its image here in the UK and the United States. And of course, for anyone who doubts the United Kingdom is institutionally racist, one of the most obvious examples really is the fact that Boris Johnson, who is the leader of the country, he's literally on the record as saying black people are pickaninnies with watermelon smiles, and he's also on the record as well making derogatory racist comments about Muslims and probably some others that I've missed as well. And this is the leader of the country who actually became Prime Minister by campaigning for Brexit, which in itself was a racist campaign predicated on racism against immigrants, and also the idea that Britain is for white people. There's no getting around this. People will say there's left-wing arguments for Brexit, but I can tell you, living here, the entire campaign was predicated on lies and definitely steeped in racism. And this is the reality of Britain as we know it, as we live it, as we experience it. No one really takes the report seriously apart from the architects of the report itself. So we need to keep our eye on the ball. We'll continue to report on the news as we see it here at the African Diaspora News channel. Let us know what you think about these issues we've been discussing. Spread the word. Let everyone know about the network. Thank you for tuning in for now. My name is Richard Sudan, and I will see you next time.